Is evolution really true? I have not seen it in mankind. But behind me, I've got the evolution of computers. And what do I mean by that? Well, I'm going to show you that in a few minutes. Welcome back to Pushing Technology to the Limit. If you are wondering what my theory of evolution of computers is I've got a set of computers back here that have small to big. And I'm going to start with, well, if I was going to give it a category, it would be the worst to the best. And they're all different price ranges. And there's two computers on my table back here that I could say that would be equal to, well, actually one computer is equal to a laptop. And so if you're trying to buy a computer, or you're feeling like I need to upgrade, or my computer's acting weird and I need to do something else, well, check this video out before you go buy another computer and buying a cheap unit compared to an expensive one, and why. So let me get showing you those computers now. So here I've got 5 computers, and I have worked on all of them pretty much except for the last one. The last computer, that's the tower, is one that I've just bought refurbished. So these computers are microsystems basically, except for the last one over here, which is the tower. The laptop and all these other 3 smaller machines are what they call business machines. Now, this is why I call it the evolution of computers, because the first 2 that you see, the one that has no face on it, I'm just finishing working on that. That computer is no better than this laptop on the left-hand side. And there's one thing wrong with all these computers except for the 5th one. And that is that they have planned obsolescence. Now, there is planned obsolescence in this big one too, but you know, it's a heck of a lot better than all 4 of these other ones. So let me get into diagnosing what I mean by what's wrong with these. And if you're wondering why I have so many of them, well, the second one I'm actually working on for somebody, one of my clients, and the other 2 before the 5th one are actually units that I've fixed, but they weren't really fixable. They were actually, and I'll explain that a little bit more when I show you the insides of these computers. Now, the 3rd one does work, but if something is not done to prevent it from burning up, it's basically these units are self-destructing because of the heat and the compactness of it. And that's the problem that I find with the small computers, is that they're so compact that the heat cannot escape efficiently, depending on the design of the unit and how many fans they put in. So let me show you the second computer and what I'm talking about with that particular unit. So this first miniature tower that I've got is pretty much a laptop that has not evolved into a tower just yet, or any of those other ones I've got. Now, this one is absolutely the worst one I've had to repair because of the size and other things that are on it. So, for example, this has no internal power supply. When I look on the back, it actually has a little connector. I don't know if you can see that or not, but I'll point it right here. I'm putting my finger right on top of it. There's a little laptop connection. Although it has the regular parts for like a tower that would, to plug in your monitors and keyboards and network cards. But the one thing that this thing does not allow you to do is add any more, accessories like a really nice video card or another, I don't know, a network card. So like if you want two of them in there, you can't do this on this unit. And the other thing I just learned about this computer is one of the problems that was with this computer is that this CD-ROM was shot. Well, not this one. I've replaced it. So I looked into this whole machine here, and you have to raise this CD-ROM up to get at the hard drive. And when I looked at the hard drive, I was looking at upgrading it for the customer. Come to find out that the hard drive is a certain size to fit in this computer. The other thing I found out after replacing the CD-ROM is the fact that this unit will not eject when you push the little eject button here. Now, there's like a little eject button right beside it, and it's electric. It's not, you're not using the actual eject button on the CD drive itself. So what did they do to this system? They made it so that you had to buy their CD-ROM or DVD-ROM or whatever it is that's in there. But you see this little cord up on top here? This little cord is actually the eject button. And it took a special CD-ROM and DVD-ROM it had to be, and what I mean by special, I mean it had to be HP's own CD drive. So I went and I looked up the parts on the internet. I couldn't find any CD drives for this computer. So the customer is basically stuck with a CD-ROM that will not eject when this face panel is all covered up so that it looks like a nice little computer. The only way that they're going to be able to eject their CDs and DVDs is by going into Windows, if Windows will boot up, that is. I know it will work now, but I'm saying if something happens, they're going to have to take the face off to get at the drive to pop it out. Because there's a little emergency eject thing under here that you can push a little, like a pin and what have you in it. So it does have good ventilation, and I haven't had any problems with a lot of heat when the covers are on. But in reality, this is not the best computer to go with if you want to do upgrades. I mean, if you're going to have a laptop system, you might as well go with a laptop. Don't go with this thing. So there's just many things that are, I can't really get into all the details about it, but there's just other things that are with this system that I don't like. I mean, yes, there's some regular desktop parts, and like the RAM you can replace. The CD drive is a no-go. I mean, yes, like I said, you could replace it, but you can't eject it unless Windows is operating. So, and then the other thing was the hard drive. That was kind of a bust. So let me move on to the next computer, and we're going to look inside of that and see what goes on with that particular system. So here's my next computer, and it's a compact machine, and it's from Dell, and I'll just say that this one is not as new as the other ones that I've used, and especially like the one I just got done showing you, because this one has a floppy drive in it, and what computer comes with a floppy drive anymore? None. So let me show you the back of this thing. So this does have a internal power supply. It has your parts on the back to plug your monitor, and see, even this thing is so old because it has a parallel port right here for a very old printer, and they don't even come with those anymore. In this other kind of a serial port here, that's really old. But it does have Windows 7, and it's capable of. It did come with Vista originally, but then there was 7. Somebody repurposed it for 7, and so that's on there. But let me look at the inside of the computer and I'll show you what's going on in this thing. So this thing is so compact that the power supply, the CD-ROM and floppy drives, and actually these are actually a floppy, let's see here, which one's on top? Alright, so the CD drive's on top, so it's a laptop CD drive, and it's a laptop floppy drive. So these are not actually, desktop parts until we get to the motherboard. And yes, this does have a CPU fan that's exhausting it somewhat out the front, but this thing works, but it gets so hot that it will self-destruct because there's no good ventilation in this system, and there's no way to put good ventilation in it at all because it's so squashed. And it does have actually I replaced the hard drive. It does have a desktop hard drive. It has desktop RAM. But you know what? When this power supply goes, it goes. And there's no replacement for that. And I've looked for power supplies. And yes, you can buy them, but they're more expensive than buying a whole new system. I mean, you can buy a full-size tower power supply for less than what this thing would cost you. So, there again, I mean, you can't. Yes, you got parts in here to like a PCI slot and a video card, but this thing is so small. Why did they even bother put them in there? Because this thing is so small, you can't. The cards will stick all the way out here like that, and you can't even shut the door on it. So this is another system that I would not recommend buying. And yes, it's a little bit better in some ways than the first, but not quite, because it is like laptop parts. And yes, the other one had laptop parts, but it had a desktop, CD drive, hard drive, and RAMs. And this does too, but the CD drives, I looked for the CD drives too for replacing this unit, and there is none. So basically, when these things die, they die. They're goners. There's no fix to it. And a lot of times, the first thing that goes is the power supply. And that's what I found with this one over here, it's just the dead power supply. So let me get to showing you on the next computer what's going on with that one. So here's this other Dell computer. That's my last micro system I've got to show. It's basically the same as the other three were, except that this has a full-size CD drive for a tower. Let's look inside of the unit itself, and I'll show you. So this computer works itself, but, and I mean this is a big but, the power supply was shot. I tried 3 times to get a power supply for this thing, and the way I was able to test it was I just plugged in a regular desktop power supply and it worked just fine. I was able to load Windows on it and get everything working, but absolutely no way to replace the power supply in this thing. And one of the reasons why that it died was because this was another one of those squashed systems. Now, in a way that this one is a little bit better because I am able to put cards in here and do a little bit of upgrading, but there's not much you really can put in it though, because it's not as big as a full-size tower. It is there is a little bit some old parts on this here. Let me actually stand this thing up so we can look at it. So this particular computer has PS2, and that does not mean PlayStation 2. That's the old mouse and keyboard plugs. It does have the Ethernet. It's not gigabit. The other one I showed you was gigabit, and the other, smaller unit that I showed you, that was the HP, that does not have gigabit. But all the rest of these do. And it has the older style I'm not sure if that's parallel or if that's, that's kind of kitty corner. It's not really parallel, but it's another type of 9-pin plug which they had on older systems. The graphics card on this thing stinks. And it's not, it just, I don't know what's with it. But one of the things that I was thinking about doing is replacing some of these with a really nice tower case. And just transfer the motherboard over to the new case. But, like I said, there's no power supply because I couldn't get one for it. It was, well, I could find one, but it was just way more money than I wanted to spend on an old machine like this. I mean, it's not that bad, but you can't upgrade it, and this thing will get hot the same way that those other ones get hot. And I had the hard drive out because I used it for something else. I just basically used this for my parts machine. And, there's just not much you can do with these systems when they're this small. Now, let's show you the last computer, which is my best computer that I would recommend getting. So here's the last computer. And this is one that I would recommend. And I don't mean like the brand or the model that I'm recommending. I'm talking about the size. Anytime you get a bigger computer and it's more expensive, it will be more upgradable than the cheap systems, like the ones that I've just showed you. Those are just way too hard. So let me show you the inside of this thing. So it has a internal power supply. It's a full-size power supply, so if it goes, I can replace it with another one. And there's tons of space in here. There's actually room for another hard drive. There's room for another CD drive or DVD drive, whatever you want to put in there. There's a full-size, CD drive right now. And on the motherboard, I can actually add, parts, like whether it's a graphics board or networking card or sound cards or whatever peripherals I want to put in here. I can put up the 4 little units in here, four other cards, counting the graphics board. Let me show you the back of this thing. So here's the back, and it has gigabit networking, and it has a truckload of ports for USB, and it also has HDMI and the old VGA port with the analog sound card. I've used all of them, and they work great. And this type of a system is easy to repair and flexible compared to all the rest of the systems that I have showed you on this video. So when we are looking at buying computers, always go with the bigger units. Whether it's Dell, HP, I don't care what brand you buy. Just make sure that it's expensive. Now some of you are like, well, I can't afford it really. Well, you know what, folks? There's a lot of times I felt like that myself. And I was like, you know what? I want the best. And it wasn't just because I wanted the best. I wanted something fixable. And I didn't want to buy something cheap and then having to fight with it. And, they had to deal with that nonsense. So I decided to buy something expensive, and I'll tell you what, it's paid off big time. And I never regretted spending $2,000 on a particular system. And yes, of course, on this last computer I showed you, I did not even pay that because it's a refurbished system. But still, when it was brand new, it was a heck of a lot more expensive than a lot of these little scrawny systems that you can get now these days. And when you talk about improving computers, small is not improving computers. It's actually ruining it. And it's what I call de-evolution. It's not evolving. It's not getting better. It's getting worse. And every time you get something smaller, it's not going to last nearly as long as a big honking computer sitting on your desk. So when you're looking at this stuff, always go with bigger. Bigger is better? Yes, it is. Because you can put parts in it The bigger systems are able to hold, bigger hard drives, larger capacity, like terabits. Like I have 2 in mine. I can put 4 or 8 or 10 if I want to. One hard drive of 10 terabytes in this system. Compared to the other systems, like that very first one I showed you, you can't even get a terabyte in it because the hard drive is so small. 500 gigabytes is all it will hold. And you can't upgrade it unless you get a hard drive that was the right size for that system, and there's no way they will not sell anything higher than a 500 gigabyte for that HP computer. So that's what I'm just trying to show you, folks, is that sometimes smaller, I know that smaller is not better. Smaller is worse. And when you go to look for a computer, and that's the other thing, don't buy used from some nincompoop that thinks he knows what he's doing with his computer. A lot of times, people that sell their old junk are just trying to get rid of it because they want something new. And this computer that this customer paid for, I basically just looked at it and I said, you should have just tossed it. Because it took me 24 hours to get that freaking thing to work, and it shouldn't take that long. I should just be able to throw the operating system in it, and ba-boom, it's working. This thing, I had to fight with it, and right down to the nitty-gritties. And it almost wasn't worth it. But I decided, you know what? Everybody else told her, no can do, it won't work. So I said, heck with it. I'll try and fix it myself and see if I can go with it somewheres. And I did. But it was very hard. I was coming against the bricks, every inch of the way to get this thing working. And that's what happens with these cheap computers. They don't want you to fix them. And when I come to fix it, it's hard. Not like these big computers where I can just say, all right, I need a new graphics board, I need a new CD-ROM, and then I can just put them in. I don't have to worry about, the manufacturer saying, well, I'm not going to let you, put a new CD-ROM drive in, and if you do, you're not going to be able to eject it. So, when you're going to look at buying a computer, don't go for cheap. Cheap ain't worth it. And on top of that, if this customer of mine went to Best Buy to get it fixed, they'd laugh at her. They probably wouldn't even gotten it fixed. They would have said, nah, honey, here's another computer for you. So anyways, just remember to always look for something a little more expensive than what you really need, but in the end, it's worth it. I'll see you the next time on Pushing Technology Limit. Have a great day.